Hey, good day there, fellow listeners. My name is Merv Jersak, and my partner over here in the other window that you see is Tim Jerome. And we're here to discuss in this podcast some great ideas around the whole idea of project management. Project management happens to be an interest of both of us. It's one of our main themes as part of our ongoing careers. We come at it from different backgrounds, and yet we have very, very similar ideas. So we're hoping that you can join us for the next several weeks, probably indefinitely, as we go through this huge, beautiful, rewarding career that we call project management. Part of this will be experiences, and you can tell from just looking at us that our experiences probably mean that there's a fair amount of war stories somewhere in our background. And I think as Tim and I discuss some of the topics we have here before us, that those war stories may suddenly come to the forefront. So enjoy those. Feel free to comment in the chat. And Tim, why don't we just get going? I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and maybe we'll just do a kind of a bit of an interview here for each other. But thinking about where you're sitting right now, what is it exactly that you're doing right now in your project management career? And then how did you get here? Was it a straight path? Did you meander your way to where you are now? Just tell us a little about yourself and your credentials in project management.
So thanks, Merv, by the way, I appreciate that. And thanks for the great welcome. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak publicly. Real quickly, I'd like to address first my background because it's really strange. And that'll actually give the listeners an understanding why I'm working what I'm working on right now. First of all, I'm a technology and a business and a financial analyst. Let me go just through a progress of my life. In seventh grade, when you're 13 or 14, I was starting to think about what I liked in school and what I liked listening in the newspaper and life. And I was drawn to technology. The PDP-7, for those of you who are historians and archaeologists of technology, was the mainframe of the time. And a lot of my friends went down to the university, and I started looking at it and was curious about this thing that took a bunch of paper and pulled it into the machine and created an automatic way of analyzing data. And that caught my interest. But at the same time, I was actually gifted with a lot of understanding of music. And my folks decided that it would be great for me to have a hobby. And so I invested a lot in music and singing. And that consumed me. I was going to be a professional singer. However, when I was 25, I had the world's greatest music coach. And he says, "Congratulations, Tim. You're going to make about $600 a month for the rest of your life. What do you want to do?" And I said, "I know what I want to do, and it's not this." And so I dropped out of school for about a year and a half. And I still was drawn to math and science, even though I hadn't studied a lot of math. And so I went back to school, but I went to the local community college and rebuilt my math skills and got an associate's degree in IT, information technology. From there, I added a business degree with IT, and that allowed me to start becoming a manager. And I was an IT director of a small state agency back in 1995. But in 92 was the first time I really had an IT specific job. I worked for a transportation industry, and we were responsible for introducing the AS400 and the centralization and standardization of using IBM mainframes for collecting and analyzing data. And we set up a help desk for the emerging IT that was hitting that. And by the time I left, the whole industry of transportation and moving boxes had changed. Now, this got me so interested that I actually decided to get into a graduate degree in business, because it's not just technology, but it's how technology can actually help people make money and create careers and do that. And I saw business as twofold. Number one, it's how groups of people work together to make money. And number two, it's how a person can actually define their progress in life. Corporations grow and mature just like people, and I was fascinated by this. Now, in 2000, a major corporation said, we're going to actually open up a consulting branch, and they hired 300 people for consulting. And I was brought in as a database engineer. But within 6 months, they said, Tim, you're going to be a project manager. And oops, I was a project manager, right? I stepped in my career by accident. And in 2003, I got my credential, my PMP credential. And I was taught by somebody over in Cheetah Learning, who was one of the first 1,000 recipients of the PMP. And it was a brilliant experience. I thought this trainer was so on task. He ran his classes and his programs just like he ran his projects. And you could tell he wasn't an expert, but he was a real master, and that rubbed off on me. And so in 2004, I turned around and I said, why don't I just work with about 15 other people inside my corporation and start teaching people about project management? So I helped rebuild the project management training program in PMP prep. And by the time I left the company in 2012, I had been teaching 50 to 100 people a year while I was working. And I got to touch each one of these knowledge areas. Now, 2012 was not a happy event for me. They didn't need me, and they wanted me to live somewhere in the country, and it didn't work for my family. So in 2013, I used my business skills to help 2 or 3 small businesses, and they paid me a little money to limp. But in 2013, all of a sudden, I had these training companies say, Tim, can you help me? And so I had a big decision to make, and I decided to train. And the best of those companies grew fast, and I threw all my investment, my time, and my money into the effort of helping them. And I helped them launch their live virtual training in 2014 and 2015. In 2011, we were teaching 6 to 8 people in a hotel room, and we did that about 4 to 5 times a month, or 6, and that's pretty good money. But they got me into a master services agreement and a retainer. And so I started teaching 3 or 4 classes, and we started drawing 30 to 40 people at a time in 3 classes a month. Now, move forward to 2017, and all of a sudden I'm teaching, what is it? I'm teaching 75 people in a class 3 times a month. And by 2019, I'm teaching 100 to 150 people in a class per month. So by the end of 2020, I have taught about 7,500 people. I've touched the lives, and I've tried to influence the careers and the decision-making of almost 8,000 people. And that's what I was looking for. I was really looking for a purpose, and teaching seemed to be it. It doesn't stop now. And by the way, I'm still a project manager. The scale of my projects are like launching a training academy that actually collects the interested trainers and experts who want to gain visibility, and they need help and support in marketing and building programs that help them, communicate publicly, as well as build and mature their messages and their visibility and their brand. Now, I'm doing another thing on the side. I'm in early initiation of a program and portfolio that asks people, how do we build a community, like city planning, community development, that's based on the objectives of resilience in the face of great climatic change and other changes like pandemics, as well as, can we do it with a zero-based budget? Can we actually do something that's fulfilled? And we're right now putting together a proposal on that. And it's highly, highly interesting. And we're talking with people internationally. I thought, this was just going to be a little bit of a boondoggle and be fun for me to explore. But things like this that have international impact are incredible. And it was just silly little me asking a stupid question. And so I'm excited to actually, number one, do this type of work at this scale, and number two, be able to talk about it to actually help my students and other people understand that this type of exploration through projects, project management, and programs is perfect. And the more we understand this, the more we're able to actually move forward in our own lives. So how's that in 5 minutes?
That was never 5 minutes, as Monty Python would say.
That's huge.
That's a long and storied career, my man.
Yeah, it was fascinating. And again, I'm about 2/3 of the way through my career. I'm looking at my bucket list, and that actually allows me. I know why I'm here, and I know generally what you do. But what were the decisions and what were the experiences you actually had to get there and where you are today?
Well, as I was listening to you now, I can't say anything about the music side. Music, and I love music. The only instrument I play is the radio.
That's
But as I love the music. But similar to you, I got involved or interested in this whole computer science field, the idea of developing systems, when I was still in school. Now, I was raised in Canada, central Canada, on a farm. It was a working wheat farm, cattle farm, and that sort of thing. So I think part of what got me into the whole idea of the discipline that is required in IT delivery is that whole responsibility that came with being a farm boy. But one thing that came to me very quickly, probably around the 10th grade, 11th grade, I told my dad, I'm not going to be a farmer. I'm going to do a desk job somewhere. I'm going to enjoy myself in the city in an air-conditioned room. And so I was looking for something to do besides farming. And my mom was pushing me into dentistry. And I looked at her, I said, Mom, I'm not going to spend the next 40 years of my life digging in people's mouths. It just did not interest me. Although if you think about retirement at this point in my career, I probably would have had a nice lake home somewhere in Florida and doing it differently. But regardless, my first computer, by the way, was not the PDP, but it was the IBM 360 Model 65. And I went to school to University of Manitoba. And at the university, we learned, besides the whole programming aspects of what it was that's part of this career, we learned much more about the thinking aspects, the problem solving aspects. And I really enjoyed that. So my first job out of school was with a government department. I spent 3 years with the government, and no, not casting aspersions on this particular government department, but I just felt that no matter how hard I worked, I just wasn't getting the kinds of promotions and merit-based opportunities. That's the word I'm looking for, to move forward. So I ended up joining a consulting company. And what really intrigued me about this company was that they did turnkey systems for large corporations, government bodies, major corporations. And in doing so, they had developed an entire project management process. Now, we weren't aware of PMI. We weren't aware of a lot of those kinds of things, but we had developed an internal discipline, which I thought was incredible. And so I joined them as a senior programmer analyst. I think part of what I'm trying to get across here is, as I went to university to learn IT and to learn development, I have stayed in that career for my entire career. But in doing so, that career has taken many turns. And so that project management company got me so intrigued in what we could do with systems and how we could build systems to benefit people that I decided to stay with them for some time. They put us through a process where you had to spend 2 years in every single discipline before you got promoted. And I think it took 8 to 10 years before I even got my first project management position. And so
Wow.
when I finally got to that project management position, one of the very first places, this Canadian boy, was invited to manage a project, and it was as a team lead, not the full project, but was to manage the implementation of a system for the state of Alaska. So not only was I leaving my country, I was going into a state that many people aspire to be able to see and to spend some time. And here was the promise that was given to me: 6 months. That was 1982, just 6 months. That's all we ask. 6 months turned into 2 years. Alaska turned into Idaho. Idaho turned into Florida. Florida turned into Hawaii. Hawaii turned into California. California turned into New Mexico. You get it. I have been, at this point in my career, I have spent 40 some years working on systems, managing systems, consulting to organizations in over 20 states and 2 Canadian provinces. So when I said that I went through university training to become an IT developer, and whatever that meant at that point in my career, that has blossomed into something incredibly wonderful. And the nice thing about working for the company, and by the way, in the meantime there, I had also changed companies a couple of times. And then in 2003, I went on my own and began to consult on my own to large organizations to help them with their project management processes. But the wonderful thing was I was allowed to bring my family with me. So we moved to these places.
Oh, wow.
I mean, who couldn't live in Hawaii for 3 or 4 years?
Right.
I mean, just, you know, someone had to do it, Tim.
Oh, that's great.
Now, when I got to Albuquerque, I will tell you, my older daughter was in 7th or 8th grade at that point, and she kind of put her foot down and said, "Dad, I can't make any friends. You keep moving us to another state." And so at that point, we put down roots here in New Mexico, have just enjoyed it so much. And then I became the traveling IT consultant. I've estimated now that I've got over 4 million miles on this butt that you can't see right now on airplanes over the last several years, and have enjoyed working in many, many states and in 2 countries. So it's been a great career, a rewarding career. And now that I have retired from full-time IT consulting, that is on the road on project sites, I decided that I just couldn't sit home and you know, eat bonbons. So I created a new firm, or a new little firm called People First Project Management. I think that's part of what we're going to get into in the next session, in terms of where that interest came from to keep on going with my career, even in retirement.
So I do have a couple questions here for you. My experience has, and my focus, when I was in consulting, my focus was twofold. How do I go into corporation and help them with problems like managing 25, 55,000, 75,000 workstations? And another side of my expertise as a project manager is, how do I actually help a corporation transform their mindset to managing data and applications across the entire corporation, and using this concept called data centers, and how can we do it efficiently? And so I did a lot of data center projects, and most of my work, Merv, was international. I didn't do a lot of travel. I actually was working in Ho Chi Minh City. I was working in Manila. I was working in a lot of islands in Malaysia, and I was helping people make major decisions. Now, when I was working here in the United States, I'd work with a lot of Fortune 100s and Fortune 50s. And these guys were making like 7 and 8 figures, and they'd been in their positions for like 4 decades. And I was watching in awe the way they were able to make decisions. And this was really fascinating because, you know, you talk about organizations and that kind of stuff. It's, you know, these guys would always tell me, it's not about the work. It's not about the project. It's about the people. And it sounds like this name of this business is almost in alignment, or at least in parallel with what I was speaking about. Can you actually dig into maybe your attitude and mindset around that?
Around the whole people side.
Yeah.
Well, here's, this is interesting, and this may have been part of the turning point in my career. A colleague and I were sitting around at one point, and we were looking at sort of our, he was an EDSer. EDS is no longer around. I belonged to a sister company with EDS, but we had both grown up in these project management situations. And we both looked back over our careers, which at that point, I think was 20, 25 years. And we came to the conclusion, Tim, that not a single project hiccup that we had seen or had occurred, or even a couple of failures that we had both witnessed, were the result of process or the result of technology. And so that only left the third stool. Remember, I'm a farm boy, so I'm looking at a three-legged milking stool. If process isn't the problem and technology isn't the problem, the only thing left is people. Yep. And so when we look back and saw some of those hiccups and saw some of those failures, we determined that in every single one of those, we had people issues. And they weren't always with the project manager. Sometimes they were with the client manager. Sometimes they were with situations that weren't dealt with properly. And so at that point, something clicked in my head that said, if I'm going to be consulting with client organizations to help get them ready to work with IT, or with IT organizations to help them be better partners to their clients, then I needed to focus on the people side. And if you let me, I just want to recount two situations. And I started this whole thing off was we had some war stories. Mm-hmm. My first war story was I was actually managing the project for the state of Hawaii. And at the end, we completed the project. We completed it on time, within budget, and had not been done before in the state of Hawaii. At least that's what they had told us. And so it was a huge celebration. And the people of Hawaii, anyway, they have this philosophy called ohana, which is family. So as we developed that project and integrated our teams, we became one large family. And so what happened at the end was when we had come in, because of these great people connections, come in on time, within budget, they had this huge celebration, and they honored myself and my counterpart from the state, the other project manager from the state. And they gave us these leis that I had never seen before. It looked like a leaf lei that was kind of open-ended. In fact, I just wrote a blog post about this. It's going to show up on my website next week. But as they put this on, I thought, well, that's strange. It doesn't look like those touristy flowery leis that you typically see. And so I asked about it later, and they said, not only is that lei an indication of a special occasion, but it's an indication of honor for a special person on a special occasion. And one step further, the two women that gave us these leis had gone into the rainforest on the Big Island and had picked the leaves and twisted them themselves.
Oh, wow.
So in terms of the honor, that first set me back saying, people matter, because that touched me like nothing has ever touched me on a project up until that. And it told me that people matter. And it was because we had created these incredible people connections that we were successful. But I'll stop talking now because I have another one, which is the opposite war story, but we can bring that up later.
Yeah, let me actually compare what my turning point was. And it was almost like watching a supersaturated solution that bing turns liquids into crystals. It was fascinating. So in my boot camp for PMP, I didn't go to class with anybody I knew, and they made it that intentionally so. And back then, they actually made sure that we talked together on a regular basis as we're going through the 4 days of class. And we all came to a conclusion over the second lunch. You learn scheduling, you learn quality, you learn risk. You can learn all that stuff. You can do that within 3 to 5 years. That's mechanical. It's the people part that you spend the rest of your time with. Now, Compare that to two other events. One of my mentors in consulting came from one of the big 8 consulting firms, and he wrote books, and he actually was in the middle of his middle career, advising consulting organizations and how can we do better. And he always stressed in our classes we went through, he said, guys, we're not delivering a product, service, or result. We're solving a problem. Right. And so a problem deliverable is a solution to a problem, and that's what we're looking at. And so it was never technical for me. From that time on, projects were never technical. It culminated when I was working with a healthcare corporation, and this guy was talking about consolidating the support desk and the IT service management of three organizations. And it was funny because he was all stiff and he was very careful with his numbers. And then he took a breath, and it was like somebody opened up a valve and he collapsed. And he said, that's not the problem I'm working on. He said, I have to say goodbye to my 2 best friends I've been working with for 12 years. I have to make sure that the people that report into them report into me with no hiccups. And I'm sleepless. This is the problem we were there to solve, not solving a technical implementation problem. It was helping this person transition through grief into a place where they could be relatively successful over the next few years. And that was when I realized I was doing something. Now, at that point, all of a sudden, Peter Drucker and W.E. Deming made a lot of sense. Not only that, but Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and Epictetus and Aristotle and all these guys made a bunch of sense. And then when I started teaching project management, bringing these little quips and these little ideas that are 2,000 to 4,000 years old, all of a sudden made project management not just relevant to me, but relevant to all the students I was talking to. And that blew me away. And I realized this is not a business or career for business or technology. This is solving problems that people have. And that's where I found out I had value. There was a meaning for me to focus on this.
Well, not only are you solving problems that people have, but you're solving problems that people have with people. And that's where I think that I certainly, I mentioned that I joined right out of school, or right after my government job, I joined that company that was project management oriented, but they became so project management oriented that the Gantt charts and the checkboxes became the focus. If you had all the Gantt charts checked and all the checkboxes checked and all the sign-offs, then you must have been successful.
Yeah, yep.
As my buddy and I spoke, we had a lot of projects that had all the final sign-offs. And I will tell you, I was talking to a colleague one day. This is actually from the National Speakers Association. I'm a member of that as well. And she had been doing a job in another country across the ocean. I won't name the country in case it gets a little too close, but she was speaking to the CEO, the CIO of that company, and asked about their most recent experience with their IT provider. They had contracted a huge company to do this very large system for them. And he looked at her and he said, they came in on time. They came in on budget. They gave us exactly what we asked for, and we'll never work with them again. And she goes, why? Because in their onslaught to check the boxes and get the sign-offs, they cheesed so many people off that no one wanted to work with those people again. And in her mind, and in the person's mind that was talking, the CIO's mind, it was not a successful project because it left such a bad taste in his mouth and in those of his particular client base. So So yeah, there's different ways of measuring what we mean by project success, and some of the ways that we attain to this.
Yeah, and you're right. It's all about the people, and it's all about connecting the work to fulfilling individuals' needs. It's hard. This job is a job of winning hearts and minds. It's not winning the budget. It's not
Right.
winning the risk. Boy, we could talk about this for so long.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's, it's simple. It really is simple. What's the cost and what are the benefits? And if you go through this 3 or 4 times, and if you're honest about collecting data, you realize, check boxes have their place and spreadsheets have their place, but if they're not solving problems, if they're just additional work, why are you doing them?
Right. And I don't want to ever take anything away from the check boxes and the Gantt charts. And when I go into a project site to work with a client, I want that client to see their IT provider's Gantt charts on the wall. I truly do want to see that. But I want to see the IT provider take their focus off those Gantt charts and put their focus on the people they're working with, whether it's the client's team that's on the project or their own team that's on the project, and get the best out of those.
So here's a quick question for you, Merv.
Sure.
Where do you find those Gantt charts? If you want to find the way a company does their projects and builds their product life cycles, where do you go? What part of the buildings do you see them, and where do you go, and who do you talk to?
Well, I guess I'm speaking from the experience that I come from, where we would typically co-locate the IT team and the client team in their own separate quarters. So most of the projects, I wouldn't say all, but most of the projects had people aligned in a single area, whether it's the 3rd floor of a 15-story building and that's their floor, or whether it's a whole separate building or whatever it is. So people are aligned, co-located, client and IT staff. And then those walls in the boardroom, the walls in the work areas, they're covered with either the full Gantt chart, the major process Gantt charts, or some stylized form of where the major milestones are. But it's a reminder, it's in people's observation each and every day. Whether they go for coffee, they see the stylized Gantt chart, or where they go into the status meeting, there's the chart on the wall. So it's there in front of them, not to poke them in the eye, but just to remind them that we have a process, we have a project to finish.
It's funny because my consulting mentor said, Tim, first place you need to do is go get some coffee with your client. Go to the coffee station and look at the bulletin board and see what the oldest pieces of paper on the bulletin board are. They're the OSHA requirements,
right?
And the depth and detail of OSHA will tell you how important safety is.
Yeah.
Number 2, it's what we take pride in, what our mission, vision, and value is, why we have a purpose. And then number 3, it's the product life cycle. This is how we go about doing our work. And it's centralized right there where, like you said, where everybody does. And it's funny because every corporation is like this: fuel and oil, energy, healthcare. You go to the cafeteria or you go to the coffee station or break room, that the corporation is real smart. If they're mature, they will actually have that as a focus, as a reminder in the background that this is what's important to us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's wild. I have another question for you. You have had a highly successful career. And you can actually see why you had a successful career. You make people happy, they're going to give you money. But at the same time, it must have taken a broad range of skills and capability and experience. What was it that you would say actually made you successful, and what skills did you learn, and what attributes did you carry that made you successful in what you're doing?
Tim, how much time do we have?
Probably 25 years.
I got to tell you, I wish I could say that I started off this way. One of my favorite persons that I worked with, again, for this project management company, we were working a project in Vancouver, and we'd gotten into this, we got to hit this next milestone, hit this next milestone. And she looked at me and said, "You know what? You're a box of rocks." And I mean, that kind of hurt. It kind of hurt, this box of rocks. And so I took that internally and I started thinking through that. And it was a series, Tim, of little incidents. Working on that Alaska project I talked about. We were away, we were allowed to go back to our homes once a month. But in the meantime, we were in Juneau, Alaska. Now, my family was there with me, so it was a wonderful thing. But some of the younger people had lives back home, and they were stuck, in their words, in Juneau, Alaska, unable to go home, and therefore their lives were over for that entire month. And I remember coming into a boardroom one time, and one of the young girls was crying at her dad. I mean, crying uncontrollably. And when I talked to her about it, she just wanted to go home. And I said, "Buck up. We need to get this project done." So again, the box of rocks came, and her, at that point, she wouldn't speak to me for several weeks. I thought, "You're an IT professional. You know what the Gantt chart says. You got to get this done. No crying." There's no crying in project management, but there is. And that's the part that, I began to, over the years, kind of mellow out. And that Hawaii story that I told you earlier, in that situation where the Hawaiian client had made us feel so much part of them, that we truly melded into a single team, and we could see how much more responsive people were. There were times, Tim, that I would leave the project site at 9 o'clock if we were working on a deliverable, and the client, who were not used to these hours, would come over and say, "We're trying to print out our training manual. Can we use your printer tonight after you go home?" That's the kind of dedication that came, not because we were trying to hit milestones because the Gantt chart said so, but we were trying to do something for the clients of our client. And through that, I think through that melding of the team and through that composure that we each gave each other, I learned through that, and probably also as I aged, I matured a little bit, but I began to understand much more what it meant to work with people, to utilize people, not use people, but to utilize people who are their best at being, showing their improvements, their way of helping out the project. And it's amazing how people find what they need to do and get the job done. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's the winning hearts and minds. That's the relationships, and that's more rewarding than any bonus you can get. It reminds me of two people that actually shaped my direction and in the way I teach my classes. I was doing a data center project up in Northwest Washington State. And this guy looked and talked like Uncle Charlie on My Three Sons. If you know him, the Uncle Charlie is a retired merchant Marine, tougher than nails. And he looks at you out of one eye. And he looks like he's grimacing all the time, but you get him and you get him out of his context, and over dinner he just spills his wisdom, and you see that he's always 5 steps ahead of you, and it's not on the work. It's understanding people and people's behavior and what they're going to decide. These guys who were older than me, like 30 years older, were brilliant. I had another conversation with a construction company up in Northwest New Mexico. I was teaching some project management stuff up there. And there was an old project manager that worked in the caves with the workers. And he and I, after dinner, of course, the best conversations in project management are over food.
Yes.
He and I were talking, and he said, "Tim, and you've been talking about this whole thing about the removal of middle management, corporations. And at that time, and in the late 2000s, the whole study of business and business theory was everything's automated. You can get rid of middle management, right? And it's beautiful because middle management is just there to say no. The value of middle management is say, no, those decisions will not go to executives, right? And you can automate that. And that was what the idea was. And he said, Tim, do you realize what middle management is there for? And I said, give me your opinion. Tell me something. And he said, well, the CEO is dad. And dad makes sure everybody's in line, and dad makes sure everything's fine. Now, mom is middle management. Mom makes sure everybody shines their shoes. Mom makes sure that the meals are there, there's enough food in the fridge, the cat's fed, and everybody's on time, and everybody goes to church. And we get along together even when we argue. That's what mom's job is.
Right.
What happens when you get rid of mom? And his actual statement right there in 3 minutes was what I had been trying to wrap my head around for 6 or 7 years. And it was like, Tim, don't look at the books. Don't think about all these theories. Think about it as human relationships that are the problems. Mm-hmm. And corporations had done the same thing. They were making decisions on A when they were actually impacting B. And a lot of corporations I'm talking about are very forthright and open about this. And they're saying, we're still trying to recover from this decision. And we've gotten rid of the culture of corporations, but we have the mechanisms, but we don't have, the supporting environment that says people are what is everything about. And there goes your motivation. Yeah. And there goes your inclusion, and there goes your lays at your celebrations.
Right. Absolutely. And by the way, have we opened the PMBOK yet?
Actually, I've talked to about 12 references of the PMBOK right now. Yeah. It's sort of funny, but actually, if you wanted to, I could actually cite chapter and verse on these topics that we're talking about. These are not just relevant from the experiences of a couple silver-haired guys. We've been writing about this, and the writing goes back, not just the PMBOK. The authors of the original PMBOK had to pull from it. Yep. And it's all there in black and white. You take care of the people. They take care of the good work. You create an environment. And it's funny because right now, it's January 2021, and we have a new PMP exam, and they're talking about servant leadership as the next focus. Well, guess what? Servant leadership was big when in the 1980s, when we were starting to talk about Agile and Scrum, and all of a sudden servant leadership was new then. And back in the 1960s, servant leadership was new when Drucker was promoting and Deming was promoting. And Marcus Aurelius back in 80, between 80 and 120 AD, I forget exactly when, he was talking about the leader being the servant of all. So this is not new. We're reinventing the wheel, generation after generation after generation.
But it could be argued that up until now, a lot of our focus in our learning, even as we study for these various certifications and that, has been on process and has been less tuned necessarily, even in the exams, to focus on kind of the people issues and motivation issues and influence issues and that sort of thing. So
why do you think that, Merv? I have my theories, but why do you think?
I don't know. I just said anytime, and I've been through, well, I really got interested in reading the entire and kind of studying the entire PMBOK with, I think it was version 5 and version 7 is about to come out, I think, isn't it? So version 5 and version 6, and I've spent a lot of time in those, taking notes, and it's very, very process oriented. And I think, I'm guessing, this is just me, my opinion for what it counts, is I think, as I mentioned earlier, is that people felt that if they ticked all the boxes and got all the sign-offs, the project was successful.
And not only that, but skills and this technical capability is explicit. It's smart. It's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And you can measure that, and you can test for it really easily. Now, how do you test for character? How do you test for patience?
Yeah.
How do you test for being clear-minded and calm in the middle of a crisis?
Yeah, you can't.
Well, actually, we're going to talk about this because that's exactly what the PMP exam started out doing. And we can talk about whether it's measurable and achievable, but it's really funny how it works. And this, maybe we might want to talk about in the future. How do you actually test and evaluate? How do you go into a room and say that person is a good leader? And how do you actually, can you actually say this is the way it is? Now, this, I think, is a topic that you and I can actually have a long, very fruitful discussion around.
Well, and I think, those were valid and relevant questions you were asking. But I also, I think, want to throw out the fact that having worked in those many states and many Canadian provinces that I talked about, along with that came many, many leaders, all of which had their own style.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that, some of the examples you're doing, what makes that person a good leader? I could show you, from my experience, I could bring a person A and person B with exact opposite philosophies, and both were good leaders.
Right. And not only that, but one may be an introvert and they're a great leader.
Yeah.
And one may be an extrovert, and one may be just gritty and determined. And another one just sit back and taps his pen on the paper as they're listening in a meeting. Right. And they're both good leaders. And I've read, I won't tell you how many books I've read on this topic, but leadership is almost sometimes ineffable. You can't even, it's hard to describe sometimes the ability to create an environment such that the best work is done. And you're right. It's hard to measure, but at the same time, we have some concepts like character and attribute, and that we can teach. Now, here's another topic. How do you teach leadership? Right. How does someone learn to be a leader? Yeah. That's something I'd like to explore with you further down the road too.
I think that's worth it because, and here's what I found too. There are elements of leadership, and I've been reading through the Harvard Business Review. I've been reading several articles, even recently, that talk about this concept of soft skills, which, when I was growing up in the industry, were kind of poo-pooed. Like either it was either you had them or you didn't.
Yeah, touchy-feely. Yeah,
it could be successful either way. But what's happening now is that people are recognizing, management's recognizing that these are important. And then what happens is the organizations do this rush out to find any old training company that says, come in and teach my project managers how to do presentations.
Yeah. Let's patch the tire to get the car 50 miles down the road, right?
Right. But until you can get some gray hairs and silver hairs who have been in those very trenches that understand what a presentation looks like, or understands what an email looks like from living in the trenches to their clients, one is going to be kind of like communication 101, and one is going to be communication 301, master's level. Let's do this right. So I think we also have to be careful when we just go out and try to patch that tire, as you said, with any old generic training company or any, the same guys that trained the Holiday Inn staff are now training your IT project management staff. Not going to work. Not going to work. I'm sorry.
And not only that, but I have a theory that teaching learns you skills and recognition.
Yeah.
But relationships, and I call mentoring a relationship, not necessarily an opportunity for education, but it's mentoring. It's the ongoing building of relationships themselves that teaches how to learn to lead.
Yeah.
And this is so critical to understand. And the problem is with the project management career is, as project managers, we are isolated from each other, and we don't have an opportunity to share information. And a lot of us think that if I have that secret sauce and I don't share it, that will keep me in business. And that's the problem. And so how do we actually create an environment and an opportunity? This is what I endeavored in 2014 when I made my commitment to go all in into teaching future project managers. This is what I was trying to instill. You can't change this generation, but you can plant seeds for the next one.
That is incredible. And I think probably for our next podcast, we should get into this whole idea of leadership versus management and kind of work through some of the thought process around that.
Okay. And I promise I'll quote the PMBOK on that.
Okay.
And we'll actually get further in depth. Now, do we have any questions from the audience right now?
I don't think so, but at this point, I haven't seen anything yet at this point, but let me ask you this, in the 8 minutes or so that we have left, let me ask you this. What would you, if I were to have you wrap up kind of your conversation with me in this, what do you think in terms of project management is your kind of secret talent, your secret reason, your raison d'être, or whatever it is, your reason for being, your reason for what makes you effective in what it is, your secret sauce?
Boy. Okay, it's going to span both technology and skills as well as leadership. Synthesis. It's a lot of people can break things down into pieces. Now, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I found out that I looked at things a little different than everybody else. Everybody else could break things down into pieces. What I could find out was I could put those pieces together in different ways, whether it was skills, whether it was building blocks like erector sets and Legos, or whether it was people, or whether it was technology systems. And this always got me real strange looks in conference rooms. Where did you come up with that idea? Nobody's thought about that. And I got it when I was a database engineer and a director, as well as when I started looking at these people problems and relationship problems when I was consulting with businesses. It's the ability to take things that are broken down or decomposed, lay them out on the table and see how they connect in different ways. And that really was basically the clincher that differentiated me and allowed me to come up with innovative solutions.
Very good.
Yeah. So that's what it is. And what about your secret talent? What's your secret sauce?
You know, I think it took me a while to understand this or to learn this. But when I became much more, especially when I started consulting specifically to client organizations to get them ready to have the IT team can't come on board, like how do I, as a end user in an office, suddenly have to deal with these high-strung, intense development staff, right? That sort of thing. What I realized when I went into the status rooms, when I went into requirements definition sessions, gathering sessions, when I went into just coffee chat meetings between the two groups, I realized that I could decode what the client side was saying and interpret that for the IT side. The IT side didn't always get it. They always were answering the wrong question.
Right.
And I shouldn't say always, because that's not true. But frequently they answered the question incorrectly because they didn't understand the question behind the question.
Right. You were the divine translator.
Wow, divine. No, I don't know if I was divine, Tim, but here's what I did. Because I think what happened was I listened. I listened to what they were saying. I truly understood the problem they were trying to solve. I came from the IT side, so I understood what the IT guys were trying to say, because as they were listening, they were already coding.
Right.
And so what I could do is I could slow the IT guys down to have them listen and understand and put things back into their, translate it back for them. But I also helped IT, a lot of the project staff, learn how to speak in the vernacular of their client. Because
right.
We forget, when we're IT, we forget who works for who.
Right, right. It's funny because I actually have a lot of notes that I have laid out when I'm talking to my students, and my students are a lot of engineers. And it's one of my notes says, slow down,
Yep.
think it through,
Yep.
pump the brakes. And again, as we go into future shows, it's actually the human physiology that if we understand the way people think physically, as well as the analytical, emotional, and intellectual processes going on, we can actually not just understand what's going on, but take advantage of human behavior to make it really easy for what you're doing. And you came about it naturally. This is fascinating.
I think it is too. I think we're going to have some incredible discussions in the weeks and months to come. And you know what I'm predicting?
What?
That we may not always agree, you and I.
That's good. That's good. Arguments are good. Exactly. Conflict managed conflict is where we come up with new ideas.
Yeah.
And I'm all for that. I'm all for debate. I'm all for looking at, because I want to be better than I was yesterday. If I stick to my guns, I don't. I'm already ripe, and ripe fruit has only one direction, right? Yeah. And so let's continue this discussion. This is inspiring for me. I really appreciate you you opening up your treasure trove of knowledge and experience. And I have nothing but excitement and interest to our future conversations.
And me likewise. So as we wrap this up, Tim, in the next 2 minutes or so, where, if someone's interested in understanding or finding out more about you, where would they go?
LinkedIn. Right now, look for Tim Jerome, consultant. That's probably the best. I have articles out in a lot of client sites. You'll see me, though, putting small things together. As I blog, it's probably better if you go to LinkedIn, because that's basically where I consolidate all of my project management discussions. But again, that's probably where you can find me best. And for you?
I actually have put up in the last year, well, I guess a couple of years now, I've put up a website called peoplefirstprojectmanagement.com. So that's all one word, People First Project Management. Long website, but easy to spell, .com. And in there, you'll find out about myself, my career, kind of what I'm doing now in working with client organizations and IT providers to get their IT project managers and their delivery staff much more tuned to what it is that they're doing from a successful perspective. And then I've also, the last year, I'll have 52 weeks of blogs, 3 times a week for 52 weeks on that same website. And also on LinkedIn, pointing to that website, you'll see some blog posts that parallel the PMBOK. I think it's edition 6 that I paralleled. So where the PMBOK got very much in the process, and I got very much into paralleling it with sort of the people side of the process as well. So I think for anyone who's looking to enhance their people skills, the people aspects of what they do, that's also a good place to go and just kind of align it with what they know from the PMBOK perspective. So I think between the two of us, with the knowledge we've gained, with the knowledge that we continue to create, I think we will have nothing but a fun time here in the next several weeks and months and perhaps years to come. Thank you for
Looking
being here,
forward
Tim.
to it, Merv. I really am. And truthfully, this is the capstone. This is my legacy work here. Whether I was going to do this with you or whatever, I have to do this. And like I said, I really like number one, I appreciate the opportunity for you bringing this public and sharing with me. But at the same time, I know how relevant this is. People are dying for this. This is the one thing that I see that is the major gap in training and preparing people for management and for leadership. They don't have good examples, and they don't have good war stories.
Yeah. And I've just taken, and I think we're going over overtime a little bit here, but I've just taken some notes that one of these weeks I'm going to share with you and with our audience the dismal statistics of our industry.
Yes.
And I think people will be shocked. I was shocked. I know that. So yeah. Anyway, we'll see you next week. I'm so pleased that you could join me on this and that I could join you on this. And we'll take it from here, Tim.
Let's continue this discussion. And yeah, I'm looking forward to next week talking about management and leadership and the two sides of the coin in project management.
Yeah, very good.
Thanks again, Merv. Thanks everyone for watching, and tune in and reach out when you have questions or comments. We appreciate it.
Very good.